Alrighty. Marion, I have so many questions. First of all, thank you for joining us. Very excited to have you. Have been a big, let's say, fan, student, voracious reader of most of the things that you have written. So thank you. Your writing has definitely shaped my view of food, nutrition, policy, and the role that we can all individually play. So thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, let's jump right in. So I've got just for context, our audience is largely farmers and ranchers. These are mostly small family farms. And so a lot of what we talk about is um, how to serve them, right? How they can become more successful, areas of opportunity, in kind of the current world, and also calling out some of the challenges. So,
Mhm.
with that being the context, I would love to dive right in and ask the first question. So, can you give us an overview of how food policy has shaped the food industry? I know that's a big question.
It's bigger get out. I mean,
Mm.
it's that way for farming, and it's also that way for the food industry, that the system is rigged in favor of large companies because of economies of scale. One of the purposes of food policy is to make sure that food is cheap enough so that everybody can eat it. Uh, and the various policies are set up to favor the biggest companies. The I mean, everybody operates under the same kind of approach to business. Once the shareholder value movement was established in the early 1980s, the primary job of all corporations is to produce value for their shareholders and profits for their shareholders. So their number one priority, in fact, their only priority, is profits to shareholders, and that affects food companies just like any other corporation, except that food companies are operating in an especially intensively competitive environment because we have roughly twice the amount of food available in the food supply as the population needs on average. So that means food is overproduced. That's a huge problem, and especially in terms of prices that farmers can get. And there's just this vast amount of food available that has to be sold. And so food companies have gone to a lot of trouble to try to sell that food. And in the process of doing that, have created what I call an eat more food environment, where the food system is set up to try to, with food everywhere, socially acceptable to eat food everywhere, any time of day or night, in any place, and in very large portions. And that system has resulted in people gaining weight, becoming obese, and being at a higher risk for chronic disease. Not a good system.
No, not a good one. Yet the only one we have at the moment. Do you think there's any hope for maybe a transition away from this focus on volume of production towards one of integrity, maybe food integrity, nutritional integrity, bioavailability, nutrient density?
I mean, we're hearing that among some of the appointees to Trump's new cabinet. Whether they'll actually carry out those ideas or not remains to be seen. I'm skeptical.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking on that skepticism, um, what do you see right now in the food industry that does give you hope?
Well, we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who sounds just like me in a lot of what he's saying. I mean, he's even talking about uh, a different kind of agriculture. I mean, he's talking about chronic disease as being a major problem in the United States, make America healthy again. I'm for that. He's
Mhm.
talking about getting chemicals out of the food supply. I'm for that. He's talking about changing the agricultural system so that it focuses more on sustainable, healthy agriculture and produces food for people rather than feed for animals and fuel for automobiles, and I'm for that. He has some other ideas that I'm not for, but let's just stick with the ones that I'm for. Whether he'll be able to do any of that remains to be seen. First, he has to be appointed, and then he has to figure out some way to put those ideas into practice in an administration where there's no historical precedent for Trump being interested in doing what you have to do to get some of these things installed. So we're in for a very interesting political era. I hope it's not too bad for us.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting, isn't it? I had an opportunity about a week and a half ago to be with Bobby and with Callie Means and some others. Um, and listening to them, yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of hope there.
Exciting to listen to them. I totally agree. Whether they will be able to do any of it remains to be seen.
Yeah, well, and let's speak to that a little bit, right? Because there's kind of this implication in that statement. Like there are just so many agencies and corporate interests, right, that are so big and so entrenched that um, maybe a better question is, have you ever seen? Hmm, trying to think of how to ask this. We have so many examples of corporate capture working against nutrition and against really the health of the American consumer. Have you seen any examples that are contrary to that? Have you seen any positive examples?
Corporations are about making money. That's what they're about.
Yeah.
If they can make money by promoting public health, they will, but that's not the way the system works so far. I mean, what interests me, and one of the other thing that Kennedy is doing that sounds just like me, is he's concerned about corporate capture of federal food regulatory agencies. Me too. I wrote a book about it. And and if he wants promote promote a healthy food environment that prevents chronic disease, he's taking on the food industry.
Mhm.
If he wants to get mercury out of fish, he's taking on coal burning power plants. If he wants to get chemicals out of the food supply, he's taking on agricultural and other polluters of America's waterways. And these are very, very powerful industries that have a lot of clout in Congress. And it's not clear to me how he's going to get around that unless he can convince Congress that these are really good things to do. I don't know whether he'll be able to do that or not. That remains to be seen. My experience with food industry interference with Congress is that they go to Congress and say, we don't like what the Department of Agriculture is doing. We don't like what the FDA is doing. We don't like what any of these agencies are doing. Stop it. And they do.
Yeah, speaking of Bobby, one of the things that gives me, I think, hope about listening to him is looking back at his track record, looking back at how long he's been speaking about some of these things. And so for me, it's nice to see that consistency over time. But that kind of brings me to your story and your origin story. Now, I mean, most people are not going to know this, but what is it that sparked your interest and your curiosity and eventually your passion in food policy and in nutrition?
I've told this story in my memoir. I was handed a nutrition course to teach. I'm trained in molecular biology, I was teaching cell and molecular biology to undergraduates, and I was in a department that had rules about how long you could teach the same class, and that when you finished teaching the same class 3 times in a row, you had to stop and do something else, and you had to teach whatever the department needed, whether you knew anything about it or not. And I was handed a nutrition class to teach after teaching cell and molecular biology 3 times in a row. And as I describe it, it was like falling in love. I just adored it. It was so much fun to teach. Everybody in the class was I had about 50 students in that first class, and they were really interested in what happened to food in the body and where you bought food and how it was marketed and how it tasted and what it did to your health. And we just had a wonderful time. And then I taught it again in the spring, and then I left that university and went elsewhere, but continued on teaching about nutrition. I loved the way that nutrition involved food, but also involved culture, religion, people's personal beliefs, politics. In that first class, I used materials that talked about the politics of food right from the beginning. Because I thought you had to, if you wanted to know why people eat the way they do, you have to understand how the system works. And in order to understand how the system works, you have to be talking about politics.
Could you see your future from the very beginning? I mean, as soon as you started teaching that class, did you just kind of like this light bulb, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to focus on? Or was it more like a sunrise, kind of gradually?
Oh no, I mean, I mean, I tell this story many, many times that I was hooked on day one. I went to the library to just get a whole bunch of nutrition books about what was required. I mean, I was trained in biochemistry. I was taking a very biochemical approach to this. What's required in the human diet and why? And I couldn't find two books that had the same list of essential nutrients. They varied. And I thought, well, isn't this interesting? There isn't a common agreement about what the essential nutrients are. So I went to the library and started reading about how you found out a nutrient was essential. And I went back and, I'm trained in science. So in science, you read the original studies. I went back and read the original, I got the book about the recommended dietary allowances, which is a little teeny book in those days. And I picked a nutrient at random and went to the library to started reading articles about it. And the first article I picked up was on the vitamin thiamine. And the study was done in a mental institution on 6 young women who were incarcerated in a mental institution. I thought that was kind of amazing because one of the symptoms of thiamine deficiency is mental problems. And the assay that they used to find out whether these women were thiamine deficient or not was their compliance with tasks around the hospital. Um, you can't make this stuff up. And the next one I looked at was vitamin C. That was done on 6 prisoners in a Kansas State penitentiary. And in that study, while it was going on, it was the same thing. They put them on a vitamin C deficient diet and waited to see what happened. And during that study, two of the prisoners escaped. And I thought, oh, this is not a very well controlled clinical trial. And I thought, what a fabulous way, excuse me, what a fabulous way to teach undergraduate biology. Because I had been teaching cell and molecular biology, which is very abstract, very difficult to teach because you can't see it, taste it, smell it, or feel it. And I could give these original research studies to sophomore students at Brandeis University, and they could read them and criticize them in a very sophisticated way. And so it was a fabulous teaching experience for me, and I hope for the students. And I've never looked back. I just thought, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's amazing. That's really amazing. I think, obviously, looking back, it's easy to connect all the dots, but that's incredible that you were able to find something just in that one experience of teaching that just lit you up. And it's
I often taught nutrition for the rest of my life. I mean, that's what happened.
so you've spent obviously decades advocating for change in the food system. How do you stay grounded and connected to your why amidst all the challenges and setbacks?
That's easy. I teach students, and I teach students who are interested in food. I'm in a department of nutrition and food studies. The students that in the classes that I teach are all really interested in food. They want to use food to change the world. That's what I want to do. So there we are. So they come in with a desire for change, interest in getting the tools and the techniques that you need to make change, and they go off and do great things.
Mm.
Pretty hard to be depressed when that's going on. I think they're fantastic.
Let's jump over to kind of criticism and challenges, because you've certainly faced your fair share. Although most people seem to be a fan on the internet, you don't seem to have too many trolls. So how do you navigate criticism? So especially considering that these players in this industry are often very powerful, very influential. How do you navigate the criticism?
I don't get very much publicly.
Mm,
Or personally. I don't get very much. I mean, there have been times when I have, but if you're going to write a book called Food Politics, which I did, you need to expect that you're going to get people who don't agree with your politics. And I don't expect people necessarily to agree. I do want them to take what I say seriously, to understand that I'm basing what I've said on an enormous amount of research. I try to document the kinds of things that I say pretty carefully. I've never been criticized for the quality of the work that I've done. I've been criticized a lot for the opinions that I have. I think that's fair.
mm,
People don't have to agree with me. Occasionally, and I'm treated with enormous respect by, at least as far as I could tell, by large food companies. They come and meet with me in my office. I've had many, many meetings with CEOs of major food companies. Occasionally, I will hear about something that goes on behind my back where I don't see it.
mm,
But I'm not confronted with that on a daily basis. I did have a troll on my blog for a long time. I was quite convinced that whoever was doing it was paid to do it.
mm.
So there was something about it that just seemed somebody was paid to do it. It was much too professional. And I was traced back to some cyber place in Kansas, but it was kind of funny. But occasionally I'll hear, for example, I met somebody in a meeting not too long ago who told me that he had read all of my books. I said, "Why?" There are a lot of books and they're big. Why? And he said, "Oh, I was paid to." He was working for a trade association that assigned him to read my books and come up with rebuttals to things that I might have said that the trade association didn't like. And somebody sent me a slide from a meeting of a big food company where they showed a slide of the press responses to my book Unsavory Truth, which is about food industry funding of research. And they were enormously relieved to find out that none of the news accounts of it or the reviews of it considered what the food industry was doing as a conspiracy. I don't know. I think this stuff is funny. I couldn't believe that they would assign somebody to track all this stuff, but they did. But all that happens behind the scenes. I just don't know about it.
Sure. When these food executives, request to meet with you, what are they largely asking? Like, what's the purpose of these?
Want to tell me all the great things they're doing.
Uh,
They want me to know that they really care about public health, that they're producing all these foods that have, healthy qualities. Um, I mean, that's really all.
Interesting. Yeah,
They're
that's
they
fascinating.
just want to make sure I know about these things.
Sure. Yeah. It kind of feels like, so I have six children, and it feels like, or it's similar to when one of your kids, is like pointing out what all the things that they're doing right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's not something that I've ever had much trouble with, except for that one period when the trolling on the blog was extremely unpleasant. Um, but I didn't take it personally
Mm,
because I was absolutely convinced that somebody was paid to do it, and I was pretty sure I knew who had paid them to do it. I couldn't prove it, but I thought it was something that the Center for Consumer Freedom had cooked up. um, because it had just that tone.
Sure, sure. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I should talk more about food policy and less about regenerative agriculture. Boy, howdy, people do, the conventional ag world does not like me talking about regen.
I bet they don't.
Oh.
Yes, you're an existential threat.
All right, let's move on to maybe some common misconceptions in the area of public education. What are the most common misconceptions about eating healthy or healthy eating that you wish people could unlearn immediately?
Oh. I think healthy eating is so simple that the journalist Michael Pollan does it in 7 words: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Really, that's all there is to it. You can modify what's meant by food. He means real food or not ultra processed food. But other than that, that's all there is to it. And that allows for an enormous variety of food intake, an enormous pleasure in food intake. It encompasses the traditional cuisines of everybody in the world practically. Um, I don't know. I don't have any trouble eating according to those precepts.
And so it's simple. In essence, it's simple, right?
Oh, it's simple. I mean, really, if you eat a variety of foods and they're relatively unprocessed and you're not eating too much and you've got vegetables in there, you're doing fine.
Yeah, it's been kind of wild the last, oh, I don't know, 10 or 12 years to watch kind of the this group of, let's say, health influencers on social media turn to becoming so focused on supplements and so focused on all of these other things outside of the basics, right? Just eating healthy food, nutrition. Um, I think you and I probably both agree that there is a place for supplements, but the people that need it most are the ones who can least afford them.
The ones who need it most aren't the ones who are eating, the ones who don't need it are the ones who are taking them. And I always worry that these influencers are selling supplements.
Yes, as they often are. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I don't think supplements are necessary for people who eat a variety of foods and eat their vegetables and aren't eating too much.
Sure.
Nobody really needs them,
Hmm.
but they make a lot of money for the supplement makers.
Yeah. So one thing I think is really unique about your voice is that you do come across as very hopeful and optimistic and positive in a time where many people are not only confounded by nutrition and by food and food marketing, food policy, but they often feel very overwhelmed and almost hopeless.
Mhm.
Um, and so,
I hear a lot.
yeah. What advice would you give to someone who does feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of problems in the food system, but who also wants to make a
I
difference?
say pick the problem that concerns you the most and get busy. You want to change the food system. You can't do the whole thing by yourself. You can't fight an entire food system on your own. It's several trillion dollars. You don't have the kind of money, time, or bandwidth to do that. But I think people who care about it should join organizations that are working on issues they care about and start working on them.
It's amazing, amazing advice, right? Just pick one thing and get busy. Um, it kind of lends to this. Was that Admiral William McRaven, who he wrote this book a few years ago, and the big piece of his advice that kind of went viral was just make your bed, right? Before you go out and try to change the world, let's just clean up your room, make your bed, start there. What's your vision for the future of food?
Well, the current food system, I, l- I've got a slide that I show in my talks, which is the Department of Agriculture's graph of what happens to the United States corn supply. I really love it because it's just jaw-dropping. So, there's 12 billion bushels of corn being produced in the United States every year, something like that. And of that, basically half goes to feed animals, and the other half goes to fuel automobiles. And somewhere in there, there's some tiny little fraction that goes for corn on the cob or canned corn for people. It's not a system that's set up to feed people. It's a system that's set up to feed animals, or these days, automobiles, which is really crazy. Um, and we need an agricultural system that's designed to produce food for people and that's sustainable, because otherwise we're not going to have any soil left. to
Yeah.
grow food, or we're going to have to get all our food from other countries. And I remember once being at a Department of Agriculture meeting in the years that I was in Washington, D.C., and I heard some Department of Agriculture official say he didn't think we should be growing food in the United States at all. We should be using our land for houses and recreation, and we should be buying it from developing countries where they can do it cheaper. Oh
Yeah.
dear.
Good grief. Yeah.
Oh dear. Right. A very short-sighted view.
Yeah. Do you think there's any hope that we can go back? Well, let me rephrase this. The Patagonia founder, Yvon Chouinard, he's got this quote that I've loved in context that going backwards, oh shoot, now I've just lost it. Uh, Going back to a simpler time is not a step backwards. Now, in regards to family farms, right? More people raising food. Do you think there is any hope that we'll have more people raising food in the future?
If we can figure out how to get them land, and if we can figure out a distribution system so they can figure out a way to sell what they produce. Those are the two things that I think are missing. And it's certainly true for meat producers or animal producers, and it's true for everybody else too. I know lots of people who want to farm. I meet a lot of people who are interested in food, and I meet lots of people who want to farm. But the barriers to entry are extremely high because there's no land available. Everybody's building houses on it. Not a good idea. So those are policy decisions, and government could do a lot to make that easier for people. It could do a lot. It could do a lot to help distribution systems. It could help a lot with supply chains. There are all kinds of things. There are lots of people who are working on these kinds of things, who could show the way. But unless we have a more regenerative agriculture system, we're not going to have any soil left. Or the soil will be so contaminated with pesticides, herbicides, and other chemicals that nothing was going to grow in it anymore. Where did I read that there was so much chemical in soil they had to stop producing food on it? Someplace in Iowa. Um, I mean, so we need to take both a short and a long-term view of what kind of an agricultural system we want to have. But I think the agricultural system needs to be focused on public health. How
Yes.
can we produce food that's going to make everybody healthy?
Yes. Do you think there's a lead policy domino that if we could knock that over would kind of open the gates to other positive food policies?
Yeah, subsidies. Subsidies are an enormous incentive for farmers.
Say more about that.
The insurance subsidies, the various Department of Agriculture programs, the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill needs to be blown out of the water and start over with some principles behind it. And if it did, I think it could make an enormous difference. It doesn't take much to incentivize farmers. But if you're going to, the current incentives are to grow as much food as possible, because the more you grow, the more the government covers the cost of whatever it is you've done. Um, and that could be easily changed, easily, if Congress chose to do that. So the question is, how do you get Congress to make some sensible decisions about agriculture when their elections depend on their constituents? We need to get money out of politics.
Yeah. Is there any path forward for that?
A lot of people are working on it,
Yeah.
but since everybody who's elected got there because of money in politics, it's against their self-interest to make any changes.
Yeah. I think about this. I mean, as I mentioned, I have 6 young children, and I think about this with my wife all the time. Just what is the future? What does their future world look like? Um, and it's tricky, even knowing what we know and being maybe, let's say, in the fortunate position that we're in, where we do have increased access to the healthier food options. It's still tricky to know which are the best options, right? You mentioned your study early on nutrients, right? That there was just no consensus or very little consensus among nutrients. Um, it still
Well, there
feels
there is now, but that was quite a while ago.
sure. Do you have what would you say to the parents or even just the individuals out there who are feeling a little confused right now with all of the kind of conflicting opinions on dietary guidelines? This is something that on one side we have the carnivore diet, which for the life of me, even though I'm a meat producer, I don't understand. But then on the other side, you have the no animal protein. And so, how do we even know what's true?
You have federal dietary guidelines, and they never change. It seems like they're changing all the time, but they never really change. They say eat more fruits and vegetables and don't eat too much salt, sugar, and fat, and balance calories. I mean, they've said that from the beginning. They continue to say it. How you choose to do that is up to you.
Yeah, I
And
guess
it's
that's the part that
perfectly
feels confusing.
possible to have a healthy diet if you eat a lot of meat or if you eat a little meat, depending on what else you're eating along with it. So the I think there's plenty of room to eat the way you like,
Mm,
and you and follow reasonable principles as long as you're not eating too much. But most people eat too much. That's the biggest problem in the food supply is overconsumption of calories. Um, and that's something that was deliberately engineered and it's working really well. And it's no wonder that people are gaining weight. Um, but I think I tell people just don't worry about all that stuff. You don't really need to. Buy real food. If you buy real food, you're fine. And as for kids, you teach kids how to garden and cook. The
mm,
sooner the better. You get kids to have a garden, you get them in the kitchen, and they will have a very, very different relationship with food than kids who don't have those opportunities.
sure. Well, speaking of children, um, I know that there are many countries who have much stricter rules or laws around marketing to children, food marketing to children. Um, are there studies that have been done? I'm sure there probably are. I'm just not aware of them that have shown the positive effects or positive impacts on child health in these
Food marketing? Absolutely not.
of the restriction on food
Oh,
marketing.
restriction. Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, there aren't very many places that have done it, but there's some famous studies that were done, particularly in Quebec, which had some regulations for a while. I don't know if they still do, and they could compare it to what was happening in the next province over and show that kids were eating much better in
Mm,
Quebec than they were. I mean, when people ask me what they should do for their health in diet, I say stop drinking sugar sweetened beverages. That's an easy one, and stop companies from marketing junk food to kids.
yeah. What role does the U.S. play in this? I mean, it seems like whatever we
I'm
do, there.
sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What role does the U.S. play in all of this? It seems that whatever we do, many other countries follow. This past year, I was in 17 European countries, and it was so interesting to go from one country to the next and to see how, here in America, we are very obese, very overweight. And then you go to the UK, and they are slightly less, visibly slightly less, but still very overweight. But then when you go to other countries throughout Europe, it seems the further east you go, the lower kind of the obesity rates are.
Hmm.
So what role does the U.S. play in all of this?
We export our junk food.
Um,
If you can't sell it here, you gotta sell it somewhere, so we sell it there, and, other countries are able to put in more restrictions because they're not quite so focused on individuals, they're focused on society. They have a much more "we're all in this together" attitude, or they have a food culture in which people don't eat between meals and don't eat enormous portions. I mean, our food culture in this country is you can eat anytime you want, any place you want, in as large portions as you want, and then everybody wonders why people are gaining weight.
Mm,
I mean, kids aren't allowed to go for 2 hours without being given food.
yep,
That's let them be hungry a little bit. They'll survive.
it's good for them.
Find out what it feels like to be hungry. It's okay.
Yeah. When people reflect on your work years from now, what do you hope they will say about the impact that they've made? Or what do you think that they will say about the impact
I
that you
haven't got a clue. I really don't. I have no way of assessing the impact of my work. Other people have to do that.
Yeah, well, what is the good that you desire to do? You've obviously done a lot and you are prolific to this day.
Well, I'd like people to care about these issues. And I think that's happening. Whether I have anything to do with it or not, I can't assess. But I want to see people care about food issues. I want to see them care about the food system. I want to see them want to create a food system that's healthier for everybody. I'm a public health person. I care very much about people's health status. Um, and I hope that my work contributes to that, but I have no way of knowing whether it does or doesn't.
Well,
Sometimes people will say nice things, but
yeah.
I don't have
Yes.
any way of quantifying it.
Well, I'm a sample size of one then. You have had a positive impact.
Everybody is.
Yes. Yes. So I will thank you very much for that. Maybe last thing, I wasn't going to touch on this, but I think I'm just so fascinated by it right now. The GLP-1 stuff that's happening right now in the world. What's your take on it, and where do you think this
Oh,
is going to?
they're so interesting. They're just so interesting. The what the drugs seem to be doing, and I've talked to lots of people who are taking them, um, is they stop what people call food noise. Food noise is a term I never heard before, but I love it. I think it's just great. I understand exactly what it means. It's the idea that if you have food in the house, you have to eat it. You don't save it for tomorrow. You got to eat it right now. And what they say is that the drugs stop the food noise. They make people, they slow down digestion and they make people feel full for longer. But they also stop cravings and stop feelings like the out of control feelings that people had about food, that if it was there, they had to eat it. And it seems to be even more interesting, it seems to be selective so that they don't want to eat junk food. I mean, it has struck terror into the hearts of food companies because there's a triple threat to food companies that are making junk foods. There's the drugs, which make people not want to eat as much generally. There's the whole concern about ultra processed foods, um, encouraging people to eat more than they want to, and people catch on to the concept very quickly and are not buying as much ultra processed foods. And then inflation in general is making everything more expensive and making people think twice before they're buying this stuff. So the food industry is frantic about what they're going to do about all this. The drugs certainly help people lose weight. How long that weight stays off if they stop taking the drug is still a matter of debate. I think there's a lot we don't know about the drugs, lots about the side effects. Nobody talks about the side effects, but I ask everybody I know who's taking them about the side effects, and I've heard some pretty incredible stories.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not taking them.
Yes. Yeah. I
And
bet.
and we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, the drugs are expensive. I think they'll get cheaper, but right now they're really expensive, which means that if you don't have a lot of money, you can't afford them.
Yeah. Speaking of the side effects, I mean, the ones that I've heard about from my friends and family are decreased strength. Now, that's the assumption is that's due to muscle loss.
Lose muscle as well as fat.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And
Mm,
it's yeah, super. I'm with you. It's such a fascinating thing to be witnessing right now. It feels like the world's largest public experiment. Um,
mm, right. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little story then.
That's what it is. It's a big experiment and it's going to be fascinating. I mean, the papers are coming out constantly. The medical literature is full of papers on, people are looking at all kinds of aspects of it, but they're still relatively new.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
No, they've only been around for a few years. We'll know a lot more in a few more years.
Well, Marion, thank you so much for making time. I really do appreciate it. Is there, what one thing would you tell farmers and ranchers, these family farms and ranches, who often are multi-generation, right? They very much believe that they are stewards over the land and the animals,
Mhm.
but it's harder than ever for them to make a living right now. And yet, public awareness of regenerative, organic, grass-fed, all these is increasing, and so is demand. But also, there's all of the policies, right, that are kind of designed to force them out of the picture.
Mhm.
Is there anything that you would tell these family farms and ranches?
Take politics seriously.
Mm,
You have to be united as a voice and as a force in arguing for what you're doing. Join organizations that are working on this, band together, and write your congressional representatives. Elect congressional representatives who will represent your views. I mean, I think, and have the courage to do that, but and that you have to do that. Because if family farmers don't do that, they're gonna get run over,
yeah,
as they have been for decades.
that's right. No one's coming to save us.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't say anything about the new Department of Agriculture head because I don't know anything about her, but other than what I've read. But let's hope. So the first thing you do is you organize a meeting with that Secretary of Agriculture and talk about the issues of small family farms. Get in there right away.
Thank you so much, Marion, again for coming on. Really appreciate you.